abuse across the United States. Huffers, sniffers, people who would put it in a bag and try to get high on it. It's a real serious problem in the United States. One of the things we found was of the substances, which are many, the active component that was most commonly sought after were various hydrocarbons. Propane, butane, gasoline was very prominent.
Plutarch's account of the death of a Pythia closely resembles symptoms of an anesthetic overdose.
Well, one of the problems that we know about anesthetics is that it causes nausea and vomiting. In fact, one of the rules of present-day surgery are don't eat after midnight on your day of surgery.
Forced into the Adyton without fasting, the Pythia ran a serious risk.
If you aspirate, generally what happens is you take stomach contents into your lungs. Now, you don't immediately die from that. What that does is that produces damage to the lungs as well as pneumonia. And she probably died a slow death from pneumonia from the initial aspiration.
But the long-term effects of inhaling solvents, slurred speech, brain damage, sudden cardiac arrest, did not correspond with the ancient accounts. Furthermore, methane and ethane are odorless, lacking the scented odor the vapors were said to have. The team hoped water samples taken at the temple site might yield another clue.
We also went ahead to the Temple of Apollo and we sampled 2 springs there. The one above the Temple of Apollo that used to come into the temple, and that also had high levels of ethane and ethylene, which was surprising. It was still in contact with those hydrocarbon chemicals deep within the earth. We also sampled another spring about 100 yards away, and that spring had no ethylene or ethane in it at all. And that was the spring that had been used by villagers at the time for their water supply. So here were 2 springs about 100 yards apart, one containing ethane and ethylene, and the other with a completely different chemical nature, void of those 2 gases.
But why was only ethane and not ethylene found in the travertine samples?
You wouldn't expect ethylene to be stable for 2,000 years since this rock was deposited. It would probably decompose to form ethane. So the fact that we found the ethane there indicates that ethylene could have been present in the spring water at the time.
Ethylene is a drug almost forgotten in the 21st century, except by produce farmers and supermarkets.
Well, that's why they can pick green bananas, but just before they ship them to stores, they gas them with ethylene, and they ripen literally on the shelf.
Could this really be the oracle's sacred vapor? It seemed unlikely, until Spiller explored a stack of out-of-print medical journals.
Ethylene was a major anesthetic, one of the primary anesthetics for nearly 3 decades. There's great information on it starting in the 20s right up to the 60s. This was a powerful anesthetic. It's about 2.8 times as potent as nitrous oxide. It was a great anesthetic. It produced limited or no effect on the heart, limited or no effect on the respiratory system. By 1966, they had stopped using ethylene as an anesthetic because it's explosive.
Using test subjects in early medical texts, Spiller found several shared symptoms between the patients and the Pythia.
We put them in essentially very light stage 1 anesthesia, and they describe things like lightheadedness, a mild sort of euphoric feeling, unsteady on their feet when they stood up. They were obviously ataxic, stumbling like. They were very free, very uninhibited, but still quite cognizant, still quite capable of answering clearly and talking clearly so that you would get back from them clear questions. They were just quite happy.
In its second stage, ethylene can bring on the frenzy described by ancient writers.
Essentially, stage 2 is deeper. That's called the excitability stage. You can have a combative phase, a confused phase. You're not fully cognizant of your surroundings, where literally there is flailing of the arms and legs. It can be very active. It can be very dangerous. You can throw punches.
But the best evidence is the gas's natural fragrance, corresponding with the ancient eyewitness accounts.
Ethylene has a sweet, perfumey-like odor, and we could smell it within minutes of turning on the vent.
The answer is finally clear. Ethylene explains the Pythia's trance and verbal euphoria. But how was it that so many of the oracle's pronouncements were accepted as prophecy? Two factors seem to have played a role. First, the prophecies themselves were often open to interpretation. Like the writings of Nostradamus, they were almost impossible to disprove. Another factor may also have influenced the accuracy of the oracle's advice: Delphi itself.
All these people came continuously from all over Greece to ask questions, and of course they brought answers. They told the priests what was happening in their city, in their town, in their village, in their land. And so these priests had a sort of an intelligence accumulation potential. These priests here at this temple complex were sort of like the CIA and FBI rolled into one.
The oracle's prophecies, a mixture of informed advice and ambiguous predictions, satisfied people in much the same way as today's astrological horoscopes. But the crowds consulting the oracle began to dwindle. Though it was long believed that the rise in Christianity was solely responsible for its decline, new evidence suggests it was a natural disaster that robbed the oracle of its power. And unlike so many of the oracle's ambiguous prophecies, this is one disaster that really could have been foretold. For thousands of years, the Oracle of Delphi was the unrivaled center of power in the ancient world. But suddenly, around the year 360 BC, the oracle fell mysteriously silent.
By the time of the Roman Empire, Delphi was in a serious decline. The site was desolate, the site was despoiled, very few people were coming here.
If the real inspiration for the prophecies was the psychoactive gas ethylene, what could have happened to stop its flow? The team again returned to ancient writings and found a clue in the disasters recorded in the year 373 BC. All across the Greek islands, strange phenomena were reported. Rushing noises were heard, though there was no wind. The sea seemed to boil. Glowing lights were glimpsed on the horizon. Fishermen drew up their nets only to find their catch dead or dying. Animals showed signs of growing agitation. Swarms of mice and snakes fled the town. Dogs broke their chains and were never seen again. What followed was a massive earthquake, the worst natural disaster in recorded Greek history. The entire coastal city of Helike, near Delphi, disappeared into the Gulf of Corinth, submerged by a seismic wave. Across the island, nearly every building came tumbling down, including the Temple of Apollo. Several ancient writers, among them Elian, drew a correlation between the strange behavior of animals and the earthquake that followed. But much like Plutarch's geographical descriptions of the gas and fissures below Delphi, the reports had been largely dismissed.
Well, this kind of scientific observation, which was part of the Greek tradition, was then also viewed as discredited and viewed with great skepticism. So there was just a general fall in the value of the stock.